Are you thinking of buying a real estate investment, or maybe you're already an investor but can't decide whether to do a short-term rental like an Airbnb or do a long-term rental? Each of them has their pros and cons, and which one's right for you? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi there, my name is Sue Richey, and I am the owner of Richey Property Management. We're a residential property management company, and we get asked a lot if we will do short-term rentals. We have people that come to us who want to Airbnb their properties and ask, and for us, the answer is no, because we are not set up like that. We are set up to help owners with long-term rental properties. In my mind, the Airbnb is leaning much more towards the hospitality and the hotel, and there's a lot more to it, and the model is completely different than long-term rentals. So for us, we've chosen not to do that, but that doesn't mean it might not be right for you. So if you're thinking about investing in real estate, or if you want to decide what to maybe change up with your existing property, then you need to think about the things that each option has. So which one gives you more return on investment, if that's important to you? Which one, has more risk associated with it? Which one takes more time? And what really works with your lifestyle? That's the one you should choose. So let's get into talking about each of those, and hopefully that'll help you decide which route to go. First, let's talk about what short-term rentals are. Airbnb, the VRBOs, most of you are probably familiar with those, but those are really geared towards and targeting vacationers, business travelers, that sort of person who's looking for a good property that's probably a little cheaper than a hotel in a good area, but for a short period of time. Some of the advantages of a short-term rental like Airbnb are there's potentially higher income that you can get from it, because those nightly rates are much higher than daily rate from a longer-term rental. There's also the flexibility of adjusting that pricing. So if it's a high demand area, a high demand season, you can adjust those rates up or down based on the demand for your property. And that could also provide you with more income. And lastly, there's no long-term commitment. So if you don't, somebody stays in your property for a couple of days and they're not great, well, you know what? They're gone. It also allows you to potentially use the property during the time that you don't have it booked. So it gives you a lot more flexibility in that way. If it's a property that you think you might use, that's also an advantage for you. Airbnb can also come with some downsides. It definitely can have higher expenses. Now you're going to have to maintain the property just like a long-term rental does, but you're going to have expenses in furnishing the property. For utilities, you have to cover those. You're going to have all those personal things that are in the property, like plates and dishes and glasses. Those all break and those need to be replaced from time to time. Those all can add up and be very costly if you don't get good people in the property. Another downside is that the income can be inconsistent. Unlike a long-term rental where you get rent every month, depending on the demand, depending on the time of year, all of these factors can affect what you can charge, if you're even going to get income. And so that variability might not sit well and can definitely be a downside of the short-term rental. And lastly, another downside is that it can definitely require more time and effort from you. Now, there are companies out there that can manage short-term rentals. So if you hire them, they'll take some of the time, they'll handle some of these things, but again, that's going to come at a cost. So you're going to factor that in as well. But you've got to manage everything from advertising the property to, all the turnover, make sure the cleanings happen, and anything that happens while your guest is staying there. So it's definitely going to require more time from you if you choose to do it yourself. Okay, so let's talk about long-term rentals now. This is something that we know quite well. The biggest perk here is that you have consistent, steady income. You don't have to worry about, am I going to get rent the next month? Of course, there's always that concern, but you want to make sure you do great tenant screening. So if you want to learn about tenant screening, check out this video. But if you get a good tenant in, you're going to have consistent income. They're going to pay on time. You don't have to worry about it. You also have a lot less hassle when it comes to maintenance. You don't have that constant turnover, so you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, you're going to have to fix things and things are going to break, but that's going to happen in a short-term rental as well. you're just going to have a lot less hassle for repair and maintenance. Another pro for a long-term rental is that you're going to have lower operating costs. Tenants will pay utilities. There are other things that tenants can be responsible for in terms of maintenance, depending on what your lease says. But overall, it's a lot less operating costs for a long-term rental. So nothing comes with no risk, right? And long-term rentals can have some risks and downsides as well. You have a long-term tenant and you have a fixed rental income. So until that lease renews, you're going to get the same income every time. That's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you're maximizing your rent. But if you're not, then you don't have the option to raise or lower it based on demand. Also, you don't have really any flexibility. You can't really use that rental property. And if that's not important to you, then that's not really a downside. If you're looking to have it rented the whole time, that's fine. But if you're considering maybe using it when you come to town or something like that, then you don't really have that flexibility. And lastly, if you've got a bad tenant, then evicting them can really be a hassle. And there is that headache of, getting the rent paid and things like that. But again, the better tenant screening you do up front, better tenant you get, generally won't be a problem. Okay, so I wanted to do a little example and just show some of the differences. And this is very high level. I don't know the specific property that this Airbnb is, but I did look in the same general area and got as close as I could to a long-term rental just to compare. What I found was for an Airbnb with a 1-bedroom in Fairfax, Virginia, we're looking at about $178.50 on average per night. Now, the occupancy rate was about 54% on average. So that equates to about 16.2 nights per month that the property is occupied. So if you take the average nights times the average nightly rate for that month, you can expect about $2,892.30 on average for your rental income with a short-term rental like an Airbnb. Now, if you take a similar property, again, I don't know that this is exact same community or whatever, but similar 1-bedroom unit in Fairfax would rent for about $2,370. Of course, there's so much variation to the type, but I tried to find ones that were similar. But it gives you an idea of some of the difference in what you could expect. This is going to vary, but I just wanted to see for myself what we're talking about and what the difference was. But I would say there's going to be a few $100 difference. But again, if your property doesn't rent, or we have people who aren't traveling, or whatever happens, then you're going to get a lot less rent, and the difference is going to be much smaller. Okay, so when you're thinking about this, and even in this example, even if the income was higher with an Airbnb, we're really looking at what your net is, right? So it kind of doesn't matter how much income, but if your expenses are so much higher with an Airbnb and your net is much lower, then that's what you really want to look at, right? So maybe a long-term rental is a better option. But again, that income isn't the only factor to consider. A couple other things I want to point out that you should be aware of. You have to be very conscious of knowing what the restrictions are in a jurisdiction. Like the counties have certain restrictions on long-term or short-term rentals. And if it's in an HOA or a condo association, they're pretty much going to not allow the short-term rentals. So people do it. All these apartments that I looked up, I know these, kind of where they are. I'm pretty sure that those rules say that you can't do it, but people work around it. So just know that if you do get caught or you get in trouble and you can't do it anymore, you can always turn it into a long-term rental, but you should be aware of what the rules are about what you can and can't do. The other thing to be aware of is scams. Now, we've gotten calls from people who wanted to rent a property, right? Some people were upfront and they said, I'm going to rent it, I will be responsible, but I am going to sublet it. Basically, they're going to run it as an Airbnb. Could you do that? I mean, I see a lot of courses and different things out there showing people how to do this. I suppose it's a viable business model, but you want to be careful. If it's your rental property, that person may be responsible, but you have no idea who's coming in and out of your property. So we've had people who, also wanted to rent it, and they were going to, they made up some things, but we figured it out and we knew that this is what they were doing. And so for us, that's off the table. We're not going to let people do that. You might think differently and you might be okay with it because you know you're going to get the money and let them run their business, but essentially they're running a business out of your property. I don't know if I would like that. But in any case, those are a couple things to just keep in mind. So if somebody wants to rent, make sure that they are the ones renting, they are the ones there. And you can do that by doing periodic inspections too. Last things to consider. If you're in a high demand area and you have a lot of tourists and you're close to the city, short-term could be a great option as long as, you comply with all the rules and regulations. Could make you a lot of money. If income is a priority to you and you think you can max out your income with a short-term rental and you can manage it and you have the time and you're willing to take the risks, do it. You know what? It's a good option and you can probably make more money than a long-term rental. So go for it. If you prefer a more passive approach to a rental property, long-term rental is probably a better option for you. You can even if you do it yourself, it's definitely more hands-off than a short-term rental. And if you turn it over to a property manager, it's even more hands-off. And again, keep those laws in mind and keep on top of them so that you not only make sure you comply, but if things change for the worse for your rental business, that could significantly impact your income and the option of doing it as a short-term rental. So just keep that in mind too. So the bottom line is, do your research, look at all these factors, decide what makes sense for you with your time, with your risk tolerance, with your effort, and then decide what makes sense. Either way you go, owning real estate, investing in real estate is a positive thing, and you can always change. If you try Airbnb, it doesn't work, you can always go the long-term route. So you're never gonna go wrong. But I hope this was helpful in just kind of thinking through some of the things and looking at potential scams, and just be aware because there's a lot of that out there. So if you like this, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share with people you know. If you have other ideas, if you've had situations, or if you have thoughts on what's worked for you in the short-term rental, please share it in the comments below because I want this to be a community and we help each other. So thanks for watching. See you next time.